to introduce myself. Stoner Story Witch.
It's an illusion to think that if the Jews were freed from Egypt, but all these Egyptians died in the process, that the Jews were really free. It's not really free. We're connected to each other. And any group whose liberation is at the expense of another group, it's an illusion. It's not real freedom.
Hello and welcome to the Stoner Story Witch. My name is Kristyn, and I am so grateful to be hosting this podcast on the lands of the Chorotega people, colonially known as Costa Rica. I am very excited to share today's conversation with you. It is a conversation that I had with a dear friend of mine who has actually been on the podcast before, very briefly. She's a part of my embodied social justice cohort, which is a group of people that I have been meeting with now for over 3 years. My hope in having Anna on this podcast today is to share a story of her real life as it kind of occurred through our weekly gatherings, as it was kind of unfolding. I extended the possibility that maybe I could have her on the podcast because in addition to finding the cracks in the wall of liberation and analyzing attachment and contact nutrition and all the things in popular stories, I'm finding, as I'm coming up on the year anniversary of this podcast, that there's also a desire in me to really be amplifying the stories that I want to be seeing more of in the world, and not just, okay, well, let's find the cracks in the wall and see the story that maybe wanted to come out but maybe we weren't able to see, but actually amplifying the stories that are happening in very real lives in the real world, and creating, I don't know, like a little, I keep on thinking of just any podcast is just a campfire that we get to sit around. And so I feel like today's podcast episode is a campfire that I've invited a dear friend to come and share her story. And her story is a story in 3 acts. I think her story really speaks for itself. I feel like we do a pretty good job in the recording of kind of introducing who she is and why she's here, and that she kind of lays out her story. But I will just say that as just an introduction, that Anna is not only a dear friend of mine and a co-holder of this embodied social justice cohort that we've been meeting in for 3 years. Anna works currently for the Black Space Cooperative, and throughout her life has spent decades working in theater companies. She's also very much a mentor and just companion in the work of animism and spirituality and embodied practice and reaching towards a world of liberation. It felt really nice to try something new and highlight a story that I felt was very profound. I felt very touched. I felt very inspired. And so I am just super honored to have her on the podcast and grateful that you are all tuning in to this little campfire where we can just listen to the story unfold. And without any further ado, here's my conversation with Anna. All right. Well, welcome to the Stoner Story Witch, Anna. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Hi, Kristyn. Happy to be here.
So I want to take a moment before we drop into the story that you're here to share and just invite you to introduce yourself with what identities do you lead with?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I am a white Ashkenazi Jewish person, American citizen, anti-Zionist Jew. I'm also a cisgendered woman, pansexual and polyamorous, raising a non-binary child. And I'm a cultural worker. I'm an artist and I organize artists and I work in the solidarity economy, creating cooperative structures and mutual aid among artists and arts organizations. That's some of my work in the world.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for diving into that. And I also just want to take a quick moment before we dive in to just preface that I invited you to come on the podcast because we are part of a what originally started out as a white-bodied caucus space, but it's kind of morphed into a little bit broader than that, from an embodied social justice cohort that we were in 3 years ago, and that we just realized this week that we're coming up on our 3-year anniversary as a little group. There's 8 of us that meet for the most part every week for the last 3 years, and we might get into that in a little bit more. But that it's just, I think that I'm really proud to have someone in that group on to talk about the story that you're going to be sharing today, and just what an absolute pleasure and honor it is to be part of a group where we are kind of giving little snippets of what's going on in our lives individually around embodied social justice and what does liberation look like for us. And to have people that are like, maybe that, I've never met you in real space. Like we've only ever communed virtually. And also it's like, that with that, I feel quite a level of intimacy, almost in a way that you're not enmeshed in my real world life either. And that it's like, we can bring these stories, we can bring these troubles, and we can kind of drop in like a really real way that sometimes doesn't always feel possible. Maybe with people that we're actually like in embodied space with. And I'm just, I'm really honored that you accepted the invitation to come on and kind of share this episodic story that I was really touched by as I kind of got to witness its unfolding, and that acknowledging that stories are never really complete, like until we die, like our stories just do continue to unfold, but that it felt like there
maybe
was
even after that.
Oh my gosh, thank you for naming that. Yeah,
Definitely
absolutely.
after that,
definitely after that, there's legacy and there's roots and there's for, like those, and in ways that we would like never even be able to explicitly see or mention. Absolutely. But that it felt like your story had kind of enough of a roundedness to it that you felt ready enough, and that the story was still fresh enough for us to come on. And I don't actually know when this podcast is going to air, but I will just name that we are recording on May 7th. And so of 2025. And so I want to I kind of want to just open it up to you to kind of introduce the real story that from your life that you kind of want to dive into. You said it was a story in 3 acts.
Yes. Thank you, Kristyn. And I just want to say thank you for the invitation. And yes, the group that we're a part of together is really beautiful and very rich. And maybe we can talk more about that later. But it was sweet to receive the invitation, and to kind of have reflected back to me that the events and the experiences that I was sharing from my life felt like a meaningful story to share with others. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll share a story from my life, which is a very recent story, just over the past month or so. It's a story in 3 acts, and just as a framing. So I used to run a theater company. I come from a theater background, and we created all original work that was based on mythical content in some kind of way. And so I've engaged really deeply with stories and myths over the course of my life. And gather a lot of meaning from them. And so this is not somebody else's story, but this is like my real life story. But I feel like it kind of follows this arc of kind of an initiation story. And I've been reading a book, which I want to reference, called Wise Power, which is about menopause as an initiation. Um, and it's I can find the authors and send them to you. But it's really looking at the experience of menopause as a midlife initiation into a deeper level of power and wisdom in specific, for those of us who are menstruating and then go through this period where we stop menstruating and everything that goes along with that. So I am definitely in the midst of that change myself. I'm 45 years old, and I have been going through it for a few years, and I think I'm nearing towards the end of it, but I'm still kind of in the midst of it, and it's a pretty deep experience. So I as a whole, kind of framing this story as a midlife initiation ritual, is what I want to frame it with.
I think it's nice that you're kind of setting the stage for um identifying that there's different types of stories, and that and I love that this is a real life story. And one of the things that I want to start doing more on the podcast is identifying when real life stories are better than anything that Hollywood can actually serve us, right? That they're like, to me, and I know it will come out, but like there are elements of your story that just felt so juicy and like, oh my God, like I don't get this. I don't get this from any, I don't get this from Apple TV. I don't get this from Netflix. I don't get this from Disney. Like I can only get this from people who are like really committed to liberation. And so, yeah, so it really, I appreciate that you're framing it as an initiation. And to me, when I hear of initiation, it's like crossing some sort of threshold. There's stepping into kind of like a new wiser stage of human development. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Great.
ready.
Well, here we go. So this is a story in three acts. The acts are: number one, the Seder; number two, ancestral healing; and number three, co-holding with nature.
Mm.
Okay, Act One, the Seder. So every year I host a Seder at my house. My mother recently moved into assisted living, and she used to always host Seder, and it is now my turn to do that. And I've been already hosting it for maybe 6 or 7 years at my house. And the Seder that I hosted this year was particularly complex or tricky. I mean, my mom is one layer of trickiness already herself, just kind of physically getting her to my house and setting things up so she can participate. And then my kid and the kids, and then some sort of like interpersonal dynamics among various members of my family. There's, some complexity to all that. But then this year, in addition, one of my cousins, so my political stance is anti-Zionist, or perhaps post-Zionist. I've been seeing that and using that somewhat more. And, I am definitely an American Jew in favor of a free Palestine, not just in favor, but working towards it actively. That's my political stance. And I also have quite a bit of family in Israel. I grew up going to Israel quite a lot. I have my aunt and my first cousins are all Israeli, and they run the political gamut from kind of center, which to me looks quite conservative, all the way to fairly radical leftist. Okay, so I have one cousin who lives nearby but has very different political views than me on this topic, fairly strongly Zionist. And we hadn't really spoken much since October 7th, 23. And I decided to invite her to the Seder, but I felt a little bit nervous about it because my own views, I know, were so different than hers. And what I decided to do was I created a frame for the Seder. So I called it a collective liberation Seder and talked about what that meant to me. And then we had created a Seder plate. So the traditional Seder plate has these different symbols on it that represent parts of the Exodus story. And then we created a alternative Seder plate, and we'd gotten this idea from different resources and people that I'm in touch with, and some things that I'd seen online with different symbols on the plate, including a strawberry to represent Palestinian liberation and an acorn for indigenous land, and a couple of other things on there. And then my cousin asked me if she could put a lemon on the Seder plate for the hostages in Gaza. And I said, yeah, of course. Yes, you can. So she put her lemon on the Seder plate. And, we had a moment where I framed it with collective liberation. And then, I spoke about the various symbols on there. And she spoke about her lemon, and I spoke about the destruction going on in Palestine. And we were able to hold all of that in this framework of collective liberation. And it went really well. We were all able to, I did not censor myself. I was able to say everything that I believe about what's happening, and really hold space for that, as well as, make space for her to share her perspectives and her feelings. And it was all held within that frame of collective liberation. And everybody got along, and we, hugged each other, and we maintained our family relationships. And I felt really proud of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Even though I know this story because you shared it, I mean, like when we met, like like that, and that, like a couple days after or whatever that event, like I still am like noticing a saltiness in my eyes, and just like I feel very touched. It has this like this, and we all like come together, and we can love each other in the midst of this, but and also there was no conversion happened, right? There's it's like the differences are still kind of there. There's still, you know, nobody's responsible for, like I said, like converting anybody, making anybody any different, but it's like, can we at least like hold this space, share this altar? Can we find common ground in collective liberation? And you mentioned that you shared a little bit about what collective liberation means to you. And liberation is a word that I use an awful lot on this podcast. And it's inspired by Rev Angel Kyoto Williams and her 5 pillars of liberation. And we met in a Rev Angel container as well. So I hope I'm not putting you too much on the spot, but would you mind sharing like just a little bit of, because I believe there's probably some power in like, how did you like open that container? Like there's this ritual space of like, okay, we're opening this Seder, and we have this collective liberation Seder and Seder plate, and this is what collective liberation means to me. Yeah, like what?
Sure.
Yeah, what did that look like, or what did that sound like?
Yeah, the Passover story is about the Jews being enslaved in Egypt, and then becoming free, through this whole experience with the 10 plagues, very destructive, very violent. And then, going through the Red Sea, again, violence, etc. And then walking through the desert for 40 years and receiving the Torah, and then arriving in the quote unquote promised land. So this is basically what the Seder is celebrating, is this story of liberation, but with a lot of violence to it. And we had this big sign that my kid had made for a recent protest that says, "No one is free until we're all free." And I really just led with that, of saying, it's an illusion to think that if the Jews were freed from Egypt, but all these Egyptians died in the process, that the Jews were really free. It's not really free. We're connected to each other. And any group whose liberation is at the expense of another group, it's an illusion. It's not real freedom. And that really there's an interconnectedness. And we had kind of a moment of quiet sort of meditation of like feeling the connection with the earth, with nature,
Mm.
and feeling how we are creatures in ecosystem. Even our bodies in and of themselves are whole ecosystems. There's billions of organisms inside of
Right.
us. And then we, as organisms, are in ecosystems with one another, um, as humans, with other creatures, with plants, with the earth, with every part of our world is interdependent and interconnected. And so it's not real if you think that by hurting somebody else, you will be freer or safer.
Mhm.
It's just not real. And so, framing it something like that, like there, that we're just not, no one's free until we're all free, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved too that, it's through this collective liberation, like setting the stage, allowing that moment for us to just, for us, as if I was there, but like, I kind of feel
Mm-hmm.
it, that, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like, let's actually connect to that we are of the land and that we are all connected and nobody's free unless we're all free. And with that, you said that you didn't censor yourself. And when I think about a lot on this podcast, I talk about attachment, and attachment is engendering in yourself and cultivating in someone else a sense of being safe, seen, secure, and soothed. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
that you are really creating the conditions for you to be seen in the way that you in what liberation means to you, and in what this spiritual ritual that you are doing with your family, and that you're also offering that all parts of this family member are welcome. Of course we can put a lemon on that, because we're not, because everybody's liberation matters, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're here to do. And then
That's right.
and to actually like have this moment where like all of our bodies can actually just rest in a state of, we are in alignment. Like we actually do want the same thing, even if there's a lot of disagreement and a lot of predicament in like like what that actually might look like, or what like the next steps or whatever might look like. That at least in that moment it was like, let's just be. And I thought that was so profound, and it like still gives me just such a embodied, like I feel like even just now I feel like goosebumps up my back, which is very much like kind of how whenever I tap into ancestors, that's like there's always this like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like tingling on my back. And so I'm just like, oh my God, I
All right.
just love it.
Great. Well, that's a great segue into chapter 2,
Yes.
which is called Ancestral Healing.
Hmm.
So essentially, after this Seder, I was kind of like amazed. I was like, wow, that went really well. I was really impressed with myself, and like everybody, not just myself, but
Hmm.
my cousin, my mom, my kid, everybody just like really showed up with their best selves. And, it was very beautiful. And I felt like I had kind of accomplished a feat of some sort.
Hmm.
And it was just like, I talked to my sister about it, and she was like, wow, I can't believe what you pulled off. Like, and she's the only one that really gets like all the dynamics, and she was just knowing my family, and she was just like, wow, like that was impressive.
Hmm.
Um, and a day or two after that, I had an experience that basically it was instigated by kind of a attachment insecurity trigger that came through my intimate relationship with my partner, where essentially I felt like there was a way that I wanted to be held, kind of following this enormous feat that I had accomplished,
Hmm.
that I didn't quite understand, wasn't quite able to articulate, and he wasn't quite able to offer me in that moment. And it kind of sent me off on a bit of an activation spiral for just like a couple of days. And like as that was working its way through me, and for me, like the practices that I have, like when something like that happens, is like I just try to slow down and breathe and just feel. and just like feel the sensations in my body. And in that moment, I was like, I wanted to jump out of my skin. Like I felt so uncomfortable in my own body. It was like very painful.
Mm.
And I have a meditation practice and I have a yoga practice, and essentially over like a couple of waves of like practices of yoga and meditation, somatics, breath work, a few conversations, one body work session, like all of it kind of got to this spot where I experienced what I would call an ancestral healing experience. And basically, it all occurred during a yoga class. I was in yoga practicing, and I had this experience where I felt it was like a flash, and I felt inside of my body, my mother's body, at the same age that I am now, when she was 45. And that moment in her life was like, there was like a devastating thing that happened in her family of origin, where she was essentially like kicked out of her family. And then it like spiraled into the unraveling of her marriage with my dad. And they split up a couple of years after that. But this moment when she was 45 was like when the shit hit the fan really in her life and like in her relational world. And it was like I felt all of a sudden her body. Like I felt what her pain felt like at that moment of being my age that I am now. And it was just like, and I could just like feel it sensationally in my body. And it was like really big. Like it was so much bigger than any pain I've experienced like directly, but I could feel how that pain was like in my body, like it's been passed to me through her. And so I could like I could feel this intense distress. Like it was intense pain, distress. It's like I can't even say like a specific emotion because it was like all of them together, you know. It was like fear, rage, grief, disgust, like you know, just like spiraling of like all of these intense emotions in her body. And it was, whoa, it was very intense. And so I just kind of like was with that for a while. And I actually, like, as myself now, I was able to hold her in that pain. And I just like was practicing and I was just breathing and I was just holding her in all of that pain. And she, over a few minutes, settled down a little bit. There was this like spaciousness that started to come in and a little bit of breath. And I could feel her kind of like just like settle down a little bit. And that went on for a little while. And then all of a sudden there was this like flash again. And it was like my body, now I could feel inside my body, my grandmother's body, her mother, and her moment of intense pain, which was when she was a young mother with my mom and her older sister, who's just like a little over a year older than her, during World War II, and her brother had just died in service. And like, there's a lot of details to this, but basically, like, she was in an intense amount of pain at that moment. And I could feel her pain. Like, I could just feel her body, and it was different from my body, and it was different from my mother's body. And it was like a different shape inside my body. And I could feel the intense pain. And it also was like grief and rage and like feeling abandoned and confusion and like overwhelm and like all of these feelings that had sensations attached to them. So I myself now, I held her in her pain. And I breathed with that for a while and I practiced with it. And after a little while, she started to settle. And then I flashed again, and it was I could feel my great grandmother inside my body, her mother, my mother's mother's mother.
Mm.
And all I really know about this person is that she came to the United States from Belarus by herself as a teenager. And I don't have a lot of information about why or what happened or anything, but I could just feel that moment of leaving her home and coming to this new place and all of the fear and all of the grief and all of the pain of that exile, basically, that rupture in her body, which was inside of my body.
Mm.
And I held her in that pain. And I held her and I held her, and she started to settle. And then there was like one more flash, which was like wider and broader. I don't have a lot of really any information further back beyond her, but it was just this sensation of like all of these women, all of these mothers going back hundreds, thousands of years and just like feeling the texture of their pain inside of my cells.
Mm.
And I just breathed with them and I held them. And they, over time, calmed and settled a little bit. Yeah, and then I made my way out of it and finished my yoga practice and went on with my day.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was incredibly deep, and I had never felt anything like that before.
Mm.
I had experienced contacting ancestors before, but it was mostly like asking them for support. And the ones that had come in were on my dad's side, on the other side,
Oh.
which was interesting because that's the side that died in the Holocaust. And my
Mm.
mom's side came a generation earlier. But I had not had any contact with my mom's side. And I think it's because they were not well enough to help me. They have
Mm.
not been well enough to help me. And so I needed to get to a moment of like enough my own maturity, my own wisdom and power to hold them. Like the only way they could really come through to me was by me holding them. Because they are carrying so much pain.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed you, I mean, you're saying that you're holding her, you're holding them, and what that actually looked like was you being in the experience of the pain that's coming into your body in this embodied practice of yoga that you had, correct?
Yeah,
Or what
it's
was
like,
that like?
I mean, it's like holding them energetically
Yeah.
in my body. I'm not like doing it like a gesture of holding. It's
Okay.
like I'm like, but it's like I'm containing them in my body, and energetically I'm like surrounding them in like a big hug, like a big,
Mm.
just like I've got you, just like a big
Wow.
breathful hug of just like I feel your pain. I'm not trying to change it.
Wow.
I can contain it. When I mean contain, it's like it can flow through my body. Like
Mm.
I have the strength to like hold it
Wow.
and not like go out of my body, but rather to feel it and to allow it to flow through me, and also not to like get stuck on it, but just to like energetically like wrap it up and hold it and breathe with it and just like feel it and allow it to flow through me. Yeah, and I guess the other thing to say is it feels like this, it's energetic and it's also cellular. Like I can feel like kind of each of these people and energies like existing like fully formed within me, like I guess kind of in my DNA, like
Mm.
in my actual like physical body,
Hmm.
because they are in there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like they say the mitochondrial DNA, like just to be a little bit of a science nerd, right? Like all of our
Go for it.
mitochondrial DNA comes from like it's our mother's, because
Hmm.
it's held in the actual like egg. So it would be, yeah, like the
Hmm.
womb having parents in your lineage. If we're orienting this story in this like kind of initiation, and you're in this like menopausal time, and you're kind of stepping into this eldership role, you've been hosting this Seder at your house for the last 6 to 7 years, and yeah, that you're really and that you were able to presence security, which is again like safe, seen, secure, soothed,
Hmm.
in this really like embodied space with the family that is, with you on the earth plane. And then within a couple, I mean, between the Seder and this yoga class is like within a week or just a few days.
Yeah, it was about a week later. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, essentially, let's see. I guess another part of this, the little part of the story that I left out was I had received this gift from a practitioner that I work with that was this like little piece of fabric art that was
Mm,
representing like a womb and an umbilical cord. And I had been meditating holding it. And then I think the day of or the day right before I had this ancestral healing experience, I was meditating holding it, and the cord just like fell off
mm,
from the womb part. And I was like, first I was like, oh no. And then I was like, oh, dummy, the cord just fell off of the, okay, I got it. And so, yeah, I guess like it's like this real deep kind of growing up,
mm,
basically. And Rep Angel uses the term growing up as well. And it's like becoming like recognizing, first of all, like my mother herself, like feeling the grief of like watching her fade slowly
mm,
and really like stepping into I am the mother now, like really
mm-hmm,
all the way. And then like recognizing the gaps in the mothering that I received
mm.
from my mother, and then being like, I am my own mother now. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then like, not quite receiving the holding that I was desiring from my partner after this thing, and being like, I am my own mother now. Like I'm not necessarily, I mean, yes, I can ask for what I need and want from partners, and that's a whole relational, dance, but
Hmm.
like and I am my own mother now. Like I am holding myself, and beyond that, I have the capacity to hold these ancestors in their pain. And when it comes, roll it all the way back to the Seder and the Zionism, I feel like there's this, very, or not, I feel like there is this very deeply traumatized part of Jews around like our pain
Mm,
and our, having been the victims of genocide,
right.
the pain of that, and the like, and what happens to untended pain, it turns people into perpetrators. Like this
Right.
is what we are seeing all over the world. This is what we see
Hmm.
on the playground with bullies, and this is what we see on the world stage right now in so many different ways. And like, yeah, pain that is untended, yeah, turns into violence.
Hmm.
That's what happens.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so, like, really feeling like the actual pain of myself, my mother, my mother's mother, mother's mother's mother, all the way back, it feels like it's this kind of like and then parallel process to like holding the collective liberation Seder and being like, yes, the Zionist cousin, I also can hold your pain
Right.
in addition to like the pain of the Palestinian people who are being slaughtered right now, in
Hmm.
addition to my own pain, in addition to like all like being like, yeah, we can hold this pain, and every type of pain can be held. And if it doesn't receive some type of holding, it'll turn at some point into violence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What also comes to me with just I remember Ressa Manikem and his framework of clean pain and dirty pain. And it's like what it
Hmm.
sounds like what you're stepping into is this like, it's like there is this, there's this wound, and it needs to be cleaned. And like, so we can embrace that there's this clean pain that it's like we got to keep it clean. We need to keep it from festering. And when you're saying, you know, like
Yeah.
that fear, that pain then leads to perpetration, then that's kind of where it becomes like this dirty pain. It, you know, like that wound has now festered,
Yeah.
it's infected,
Yeah.
and it just keeps perpetuating itself. And just like what I think, yeah, and what I think I just keep coming back to is, you know, what is our role as, you know, white with just all the intersecting privileges that we have, you know, as white-bodied
Mhm.
people, and all the different all the different privileges that we have of what is our role in liberation. And one of the things I know Resma says is like that we need to be changing the culture inside white-bodied spaces. And I think that
Mhm.
that not only is it like these in like the physical spaces with, but also what you're, you know, like what you're speaking to is um like these like spiritual inheritances, or, you know, like
Yeah.
genetic even, which I was just
Mhm.
like, whoa. And yeah, and just like the level of security that you have in yourself to just be like, okay, like I actually like I actually am competent enough to be able to like know what I need and get those needs met. And like, you know, like when you're like, I am my own mother, and I can, you know, I can figure out what my mothering needs while I'm also in active mothering roles to other, you know, or nurturance, I guess would just be another word. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And to find that real mutuality or sense of reciprocity. So I think this leads us into chapter 3. You
Woo,
ready?
yeah.
Okay. Chapter 3, co-holding with nature. Okay, so just a little while after I had that ancestral healing experience in the yoga class, um, which I also feel like I want to credit my yoga teacher, who's also a somatic practitioner. She's amazing, and I feel like she's been a really big guide for me on this journey. Her name is Rachel Heron.
Oh,
She's
okay.
fantastic. Yeah, I can send you links if you
Yeah,
want
yeah, I
to.
can definitely link to her
Yeah.
in the show notes.
Okay. Link in the show
Woot
notes.
woot.
Um, okay, so soon after that, I left on a trip to Roatan Island in Honduras, and I went for a retreat that was being co-facilitated by a dear old friend of mine who I used to run a theater company with, and it was a women's creativity, and it was called Wild Awakening, and it
Mm.
was beautiful. It was amazing. It was on this really gorgeous island. And it was a very deep experience. There was dance, there was singing, there was giant puppet making and puppet procession. There was a lot of like herbs and ceremony. And it was really, really beautiful. And there's a lot of detail about that that I won't go into. But essentially, near the end of the time there, I did a little bit of exploring of the island and talked to a bunch of local people and kind of got an understanding around the place that we were in, which, you know, expectedly has like a very tricky and complex history where the the indigenous people of the island were completely either it was completely depopulated. They
Mm.
either were taken into slavery or they were just killed or they died by disease when the Spanish first came there in like the 1500s. And it went back and forth between being a Spanish colony and then a British colony, a Spanish, British, back and forth for several hundred years. And then at the end of 1797, this group called the Garifuna that were mixed Black, which was like freed slaves, and indigenous people from a certain island. So anyway, that group called Garifuna, they were deported en masse to this island, Roatan, in 1797. And they are still a vibrant group there. They're called Garifuna. They have their own language. And then there's also Black Creoles on the island who have come at various points from other islands. There's like descendants of the original colonists, whether English or Spanish, and then there's like a large number of mestizos who've come over from the mainland in the past 80, 100 years. So there's like this very all these different groups on the island, and you know you could kind of see the dynamics of those groups being played out
Mm.
in the current moment. So I heard about all these histories, and then I had this beautiful week, really getting in touch with the land there, the jungle, the creatures of the land, the plants, and then the ocean is so beautiful, and spending a lot of time in the ocean, and then the sky. There's these amazing vultures flying, and this wind, this really, really incredible wind. So I really had been just like in this mode, really feeling all these elements. And on the last morning before I left, I walked out very early in the morning, and I walked out past the place where we were staying, past the public beach, and kind of into an area that was like really kind of wild and untended, and like up into the jungle, and like through a bunch of plants and scrambled up some rocks, and then ended up on the beach where it was covered in trash.
Mm.
And I realized that, anywhere, basically that's just how the beach is, unless it's a person's job to clean it up. So
Mhm.
all of the public beaches, all of the private beaches are like, somebody's job is to clean up all the trash that gets deposited on the ocean,
Mhm.
from the ocean every day. And I was like, oh, that's the trash that's just floating around in the ocean all the time.
Mhm.
And basically, I stood there and I was meditating, standing up, and I was feeling the earth, and I was feeling the elements. And I had basically a parallel experience to what I'd had, about a week earlier with in the yoga class, where like one by one, I felt the waves of pain,
Mm.
first of the various groups of people on the island, each different group, and kind of like the sensation of their pain, and then the elements of the place, the creatures, the plants, the rocks, the ocean, the sky, and just like each one had a different quality. And it came like a kind of flash, or a little softer than it had been in the previous one, a little more like a big wave came through my body, where I could like feel the pain of these various groups of people and creatures and elements of the land. And and a song came through to me. And this has never happened to me before.
Mm.
I love singing. I've been singing my whole life. And this is an inheritance from my mother that's quite beautiful. She was a singer, and she wrote a bunch of songs in her around her midlife time. But it's never happened to me before. I have never received a song. I've never written a song
Mm.
before. And I was standing there and having this experience, and this song just like came through me, and I started singing it. And I was singing the song, and the experience was really this co-holding. Like basically, I was holding each of these groups of people and elements of the land in their pain, different types of pain, like I had done earlier with my ancestors. And I was like holding them and letting the pain flow through my body. And then I could kind of like um sort of like switch over, or like adjust, and then I could allow them to hold me.
Mm.
And so I was sort of like flowing back and forth between being held by them and holding
Mm.
them. And I could feel how we could actually co-hold one another.
Mm.
Mhm.
I love the trajectory of this story. And I love that
Mhm.
um that it already like had this kind of like episodic or like unfolding. Like I remember even before you went on that trip, I think was when I was like,
Mhm.
I would love to have you on the podcast to just even talk about the Seder. And then you're like, I kind of feel like there's like more episodes to come. Cause I think I was just like, wow, it just feels like,
Uh-huh.
you know, it was like I would sign into our weekly calls, and it almost had this, this sense of, back when television was like Thursday night prime time or whatever. It was just like, oh man, oh, I want to know, like, how did that Seder go? Or, um, and so, yeah, just that it just continues to expand into this and that it ultimately does go back to the land, and that you opened up with, connecting to the land, even at the Seder. And then I mean, I just want to say I'm really impressed with this retreat, that they grounded you so well in the history of the land that you were on and all the different people and the dates and the languages, and that you were just I guess I don't, I mean, living in Costa Rica, like there's a lot of retreat spaces here, and there's one thing that when I'm facilitating groups, I like to echo the question that I've heard Carmen talk about in the Numinous Network, which is, like, can we just acknowledge whose land we are on and our identities that we hold here, and how do we be here in a good way? And to just be in a practice of even just asking that question and opening ourselves up to having it, this animistic, like to this animistic relationship with this spiritual realm, with like, what does the land want to say to me, or the other occupants of this land, whether it's the birds, whether it's the ocean or the rocks, whether it's the previous, the original stewards, inhabitants of the land. And I feel honored to have your story on my podcast.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
I just like, and there's like a little bit of like a capitalist, like, oh, I want to like extract it. I want to collect it. I want to gather, but it's like, I don't know, like I want to forage for better stories. And I think, this is a little bit of I've never quite done a podcast just like, I love it where it's like, you're my first. And
I'm honored.
But it was like, as I was just hearing this, it's like, man, there's just so many elements to this. And I just want to normalize that there's a sovereignty that we have where it's like, okay, I can be in control. I can be in relationship. I can be in a right relationship and reciprocity. And I can be in this co-holding in all these different realms. If we go back to when you were setting this up as an initiation story, how has your body, having lived through this story, like, how is it resourced differently, or like, what is it prepared for?
I feel like this initiation was like, into this like deep and wise power of like becoming an elder, basically. I mean, I'm still in that process. I'm not quite an elder yet, but I'm getting there. But it's a sort of like one big moment of initiation into elderhood and sort of preparation for ancestorhood. And basically, I feel like previously, if I felt like I wasn't being held by a person or a group or an institution or whatever, a situation, I would sort of pull into myself and be like, okay, I can do it alone. Like I can be self-sufficient. I guess these people aren't, or this person isn't reliable, and I can just like do it myself, and kind of build like protection. And now through this initiation, it feels very different. It feels like, okay, like every person, every place, every group of people, every piece of land, like we all come with their own wounds and pain. And I do too. Like we all come with our wounds, and they, they may become more, they may become healed, whatever, but like we're all carrying some type of wounds. And so, to me, I'm starting to feel these wounds as portals. I think I've talked about this in our group. Like these wounds are portals into something else, into some kind of like mystical, energetic power. And so by tapping into my own wounds, like the reason all of this happened was because I had a anxious attachment attack, like because of something that happened with my partner. Like it was such a little thing. It wasn't like, that's not what the story's about, but like it was this little catalyzing moment to like feel my pain. And then that opened up to like feel others' pain. And, and basically like, I guess I'm cultivating this capacity to be with my own pain and to feel the pain of others and hold it, but not get it stuck, like to allow it to move through me. And then also to like, even though I am wounded, to like have the capacity for holding pain and allowing it to course through me. And also like knowing that other people or parts of land or whatever have wounds, but they can also hold me, and kind of feeling energetically like where is the capacity for holding at any given moment. And if it's not coming from this particular person, maybe it'll come from that person. And if it doesn't come from that person, maybe it'll come from the earth today. And if the earth is like feeling, you know, embattled, maybe it will come from the water today, you know, and being able to kind of like flow with like, where is the capacity for holding, and resource myself to be held in multiple different ways, rather than like, I'm self-sufficient, I can do this myself.
Right. Yeah, like this going from like a hyper individualist kind of hero's journey or whatever to a little bit more of a I hear like maybe this I'm not I do not at least yet identify as polyamorous, but there's some element of that I find just endlessly fascinating, and to I don't know if maybe you want to speak to like how do you feel like maybe, you know, your identity as polyamorous opened you up to like seeing that support. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, polyamory, I could do a whole other podcast with you
I'll
about
have to have
that
you
if you
back.
want. But yeah, I feel like the learning that I've done, the not just learning makes it sound like it's in my mind, but it's not. It's in my body.
Sure.
It's like the felt understanding that I have like been opening up to and really experiencing in the last several years as I've been on this polyamory journey is like, you know, no one person is going to be able to hold me all the time, or be able to like meet all my needs, or like, you know, even see me completely. Like I'm multifaceted, and like, you know, certain people see more parts of me than other people, but nobody's going to see every part of me. It's just not real. Like it's not a thing that happens. Like, and so I think in monogamy, we often get into this trap of like, this is my one person. And you know, we all know we have friends, we have other family members, we have, you know, other ways that we're held and that our needs get met. But for me, it's been extremely powerful to be like, you know, a romantic and sexual relationship is such a like particular type of intimacy and holding, and to be like, that's not gonna necessarily come from just one person. Like I can't, each person, each partner, you know, has their own wounds, has their own capacities, and like really recognizing like what people actually have to offer, like what capacities they have at any given time. And it can change, you know, and what they don't. And then feeling really like, what are the ways I need to be held? And then like finding that holding in different ways from different people, and or now to expand it to like forces, like different like energetic forces. So yeah, I'm kind of like expanding that, and then also being able to like offer. This is coming back to offers and needs, Kristyn. We can have a whole
Oh
other
my
one on
gosh, I
mutual
know.
aid. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this like, what do I really truly have to offer, and what feels really good and juicy and nourishing for me to offer? And what do I really need, and where do I really need to call in holding, and really being in a constant dance and like energetic discernment around like, you know, where do I need to flow my energy outward? Where do I need to call it in? You know, where do I need to like pivot? So yeah, I feel like polyamory has really, really been amazing training ground for this. And it applies to every part of life because it's so energetic, you know, like a romantic relationship or sexuality is like such an energetic exchange that like getting that visceral practice in my body of like and while deeply connecting, like not cutting off connection or being like, oh, this isn't everything, so I'm gonna just turn away.
Right.
Really fully receiving like all of the beauty and love and nourishing and holding that is available, you know, coming from any one source, while also staying open to, you know, and sort of staying open to, and sometimes really seeking out other sources of nourishment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one other thing I had written down and then I forgot to mention it. I think it came up in like in Act 2, but you were talking about just like because I think what we're getting at here is like what prepared you for like having this
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I've said it on the podcast a couple times now, but I feel like I'm going to say it again. There's this quote that's spirit, like something to the effect of spiritual encounters only happen by accident, but there are things we can do to become accident prone.
I like it.
You mentioned, yoga, meditation, somatics, body work,
Sure.
and breath work. And I feel like all of those things, and I live in like in a I live in Costa Rica, which is just like a a pilgrimage point for people that are like
Mm-hmm.
looking for that
Mm-hmm.
type of thing. And it also is, I think, rife, like there's a lot of spiritual bypassing that can happen with those
Yeah.
things because those things can also be, like they can feel good. They can be escapist.
Yeah.
I think in my experience, plant medicine can also be either
Mm-hmm.
escapist or can actually be a container to kind of help hold that. And we can, oh my gosh, I'm sure we can have another conversation about that. But like,
Yes.
but I think that like, I just want to name that, it and I guess I give you time to speak to that, like those are like practices. It sounds to me like those are practices that you are using to enter into like a clean pain to address like, your wounds, your pain, to resource you for collective liberation or to connect with your wild self, which I know were questions we didn't explicitly
Mm-hmm.
ask at the beginning, but um, I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
if you want to speak more to, yeah, you just have so many
Yeah.
practices. And what does that look like for
Sure.
you?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. Yeah. Practices. I love talking about practices. And I love doing
I
practices.
love
Okay.
practice.
Yay. We're always practicing all the time, something. Okay. I have a about 25-year long both meditation and yoga practice, and those have taken different forms at different times, but those as like a bedrock for me are really foundational, and I feel like because of the repetition of those over such a long period of time, I can kind of call them up and like my body knows what to do, and then like as new information comes in and new practices come in, like I can kind of like what happened for me the other day in yoga where it's a container that my body can like process things through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's only possible after like many, many years of
Mm-hmm.
practice. So there's that. And then somatics. So, I started kind of more officially doing somatics practice through Strossi Institute, I guess like 4 years ago. And then I had this whole creative practice that, I ran a theater company and I've been an artist, and, creative play, I feel like is a really big part of my practice. And, in this phase of my life, I'm finding different ways that that shows up, but singing, dancing, writing, making visual art, solo and in groups,
Mm-hmm.
both. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like to me, there's this very important interplay of like the solo time and then the communal group time, as well as the intimacy. Like I feel like there's three. There's like solo, one-on-one, or maybe small group of three, like intimacy, and then there's group community. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really important to me. And then going more into the intimacy, I feel like sensuality, sexuality, and like intimate relationship is a really big practice ground for me. So like experimenting there and like really trying things both alone and with partners is really important set of practices for me. And also plant medicine, psychedelics in the right moments, in the right containers. And I agree with you that it is often kind of used in a messy way that
Mm-hmm.
is not that helpful, but I have experienced that to be very, very supportive in certain moments. And breath work, I started doing a certain type of breath work this past year. So yeah, those are some of my ongoing practices. Oh, and then, nature, just like being
Mm-hmm.
out in nature, just like taking walks. I just spend a lot of time in the trees and with the soil and yeah, just like being out with the forest. Actually, if the forest is like a particular home for me to really spend time with trees and with dirt from the forest, but also any other type of, the beach or the desert, like other types of natural environments as well. But in particular, to me, trees are quite resourcing. And so I make a point to spend a little time with a tree at least every single day, either just in my backyard or like in my neighborhood, and then at least once a week to just go take a real walk in the woods. And I also do a practice. Here's a real simple one. This has been transformative for me. I will just go lie on the ground in my backyard and set a timer for 10 minutes and just do nothing for 10 minutes. And I started doing that maybe 5 years ago, and I do it pretty much. Most of my work is online, and I do it between pretty much every meeting. I make sure I have at least like 15 minutes between every meeting, and I just go in the backyard, set the timer, lie on the ground, and do nothing. It's not even meditation. It's just like settling and being held by the ground, and it's really transformative. And then I guess the whole other piece of practice is around like racial and social justice, and my decades of experience doing cultural organizing and being in relationship with people really different than me, and really doing like intentional strategy and structural change. Specifically, I'm very involved in the Black-led cultural ecosystem in Oakland, California, and so those relationships are extremely important to me. I've learned so much and continue to learn so much, and also like mutual aid and solidarity economy principles and practices is extremely core to who I am. So that's what we were talking about, offers and needs, like the whole, all the frameworks of cooperatives, cooperativism, solidarity economy and mutual aid, and specifically how that like supports culture and justice movements.
Thank you for all that. I'm noticing we are like almost at time. So I just really want to thank you for accepting the invitation to come on. And I just want to say that I'm proud of you and proud of the container that we have in our little cohort, that we have created a little community where of people where we meet up every week to kind of have like these like little touchstones to be able to talk about all the things that we've kind of touched into, and we'll just have to come back. I'll have to have you back on the podcast to kind of walk through some of the other doorways that we like mentioned are in the hallway, but we didn't have time to walk through. Can
I just say one sentence about our group?
Yes, please.
Before we close out. I want to say that our group that we have is a very beautiful and alive example of co-holding, which is what I feel like my story is really all about, is like finding and experiencing co-holding in a lot of different ways. And that group is like very fluid. There's no leader, there's no structure. We co-hold one another in a very, very beautiful and loving way. And so that has definitely been a teacher for me and a guide, and like a like there's like this sense of like companionship on the path, that we're all different paths, but we're sort of like companioning one another on parallel paths.
Exactly. I feel the same way. It also feels like a really interesting place when, and I can speak to that, like that I have had attachment stuff come up even just like within our own group. That's and it's like, wow, this is really weird that I'm feeling such a strong reaction to a thing that happened, and I know it has nothing to do really, I know that there's something deeper, that some material, some wound is getting triggered, and that there's enough security in this space that it's like, this is the container that can hold it with me, that can help me, just be with it or work through it, or just see that it's there in some cases. It's that I feel like our group has been a very transformative practice for me too. And just my hope for everyone is that they can have some similar container with which to to be held and to be in a practice of holding too, right? Because it's like it really is both the giving and the receiving. And like you mentioned, it's because of your recommendation that I did the offers and needs. I can put a link to that, but this offers and needs market with the Post Growth Institute, which you mentioned when I was just like, I'm making sourdough, and people who've listened to the podcast know that this like sourdough has been a huge part of my life. And it's like, oh, you're doing this like solidarity economy, and there's this actual like framework, and there's, I think you had done the training too. And then when they offered one, I was like, all right, like I'll like do their facilitation and and that's also another really transformative space of just other people all around the world that are just going through that same like messy slog of how do we be here in a good way, right? What are the practices, and what are the things that we need to be practicing in our bodies so that they will be remembered in future generations? Because times are changing, and not necessarily always for the best. So
I feel this like very strong sense that the world is like really falling apart and it's being born at the same time.
Right.
Like, that really strong, like visceral feeling of like the unraveling and the great turning, which there's a whole reference point to those terms, but like I could really feel them both occurring at the same time.
Yeah. Yep. Like the death and birth, both initiations, both big thresholds, and what a time to be alive.
Exactly.
Yeah. I just want to thank you again, and that you said that you're like in this process of eldering, and you mentioned that you're not there yet, and that I do believe that it's an unfolding. I don't know that any elder would even actually like, maybe like the mark of a good elder is somebody who's like, nah, I'm just doing the best I can with what I got. And also I just want to say that like you are definitely, in your role in my life is one of, an elder and mentor, and certainly somebody that's co-holding space. And I feel honored not just to have you on the podcast, but also to just be in community with you on a week-to-week basis for now over 3 years. So just what a treat it is to be in community with you.
So sweet, Kristyn. Really appreciate that. We're all growing up together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I look forward to having you back. And take good care.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kristyn.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks again so much, Anna, for coming onto the podcast. What a pleasure to have you. I felt so delighted and energized and just absolutely gifted to not just have this conversation with you, but to have a little morsel of it recorded, and that it will exist for as long as the internet is around, that we can access it. So thank you for offering it to the larger world, and as well as our little container. And I have done the best that I can to provide links in the show notes for resources and people and references that we made throughout our conversation. So please don't forget to check those out. As always, feel free to email me at stonerstorywitch@gmail.com or reach out on Substack with any just connections that you're making as you're listening, or any connections, any questions that you might have that you want to speak to. If this podcast were a prayer or a spell, it would be, may everyone have a compassionate community to be co-held and companioned in the unfolding story of their lives. Thank you to John Williams and Anais Mitchell for the inspiration for the theme song of the Stoner Story Witch podcast, as well as Matt Schubbe and Kevin Carlo for their creative juices for the cover art and the sound editing and production. And with that, I will leave you with my quote from Rev. Angel Kyoto Williams that says, "Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change matters." Take good care, everyone. Bye for now.